Hey everybody, hey, welcome back to the 53206 cast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Meg.
And this is a podcast, but Meg, today,
Yeah.
I mean, technically this is still a podcast.
Yeah.
But today, I want to give you, on this feed, a chapter of the book, Bad Neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So again, if you listen to this podcast and you like this podcast, you may be interested in checking out the book. It's an audio book, Bad Neighborhoods. It's got its own separate podcast feed. To not confuse people. I would be confused if it was like going back and forth.
Yeah.
But today, for this episode, I wanted to give you one of the chapters of the book. This one is called, because they all have names, kind of like a podcast episode would have a name. And this one is called The New Slumlord.
And I got to be honest, this was one of my favorite ones. I thought you did a really good job at just like talking about I feel like it's like a paradigm shift. So I thought it was, again, one of the best ones.
Oh.
But I think you know, whether you're into like housing, I think like when I think about housing, when we moved in here, you wanted to like make our house, like flip our house basically, and I was like, sure, that's a great idea. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. But then you were like, I really want to buy the house behind us, and I was like, okay, that's your thing. And I just remember like the shift that I had when I walked through that house. And I feel like I've said this probably a million times, but it was such a eye-opening experience walking through a rental that just hadn't been taken care of. And I think I tell the story about how we walked through and, we saw like all sorts of like kids' shoes, and we saw like a kid's bed, and then right like the bed, and it wasn't even a bed, it was a mattress. A kid's mattress, and then right above there was drywall that was taped together with duct tape, and just how sad that was, and how I think that the self-esteem of kids growing up in that house is directly affected by that, and how we all need to work on the housing in Milwaukee. And so I just thought that this chapter did a really good job at giving a little paradigm shift of whose responsibility it is, and how we can all just take a little bit more ownership.
All right. Here it is, The New Slumlord. The New Slumlord. The slumlord had old newspaper clippings hanging in the reception area of his office. On my side of the bulletproof glass partition hung articles about his success as a real estate investor. He looked professional and accomplished in the sun-faded clippings. They were old, but then again, so was he. He was young in the pictures, about my age. The waiting room looked like it hadn't had anything done to it since those newspapers were hung on the wood-paneled walls. The furniture was old. The floor was dirty. On the glass in front of where a receptionist sat was a sign that said, "Your emergency is not my problem," and then laid out the penalties for late rent. I sat there for 15 minutes reading articles and watching people come in to pay their rent or complain about something not working at their place or asking if there were any rentals available. The latter would be handed a list of available units before turning around and walking out the door. It was depressing. On the other side of the glass, in his office, were stacks of manila folders. I didn't count how many folders there were, but it was too many to definitively know what was in any of them. He looked sloppy and disorganized. He had too many houses, which was part of the reason why he was selling one of them to me for $14,000. I think he was in over his head. I remember reading other articles about him, how he would buy houses in chunks at auctions, and the total outstanding fines he had for code violations on those properties. I think he thought things were going to be one way, and they were different. I'm guessing he made it work for a while, but then it didn't work like it should. I've been in similar spots in my life before. I've been sloppy and disorganized and a little over my skis. I can respect someone that had a handle on things and let it get a little out there. I can also respect an older black man in real estate that lived through a time when Milwaukee was segregating itself, trying to make a name for himself. In a lot of ways, he'd been successful. I saw a piece of him in me. I understand the impact one house can have on a block. We had a neighbor who had dogs once. They had a lot of dogs, and they barked all the time. Most of the houses in my neighborhood are duplexes, uppers and lowers. A lot of the houses are the same layout with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in the upper and 2 in the lower. The porch for the lower unit is like a normal porch, but instead of the top sloping down towards the front of the building, it's flat, and you can hang out up there. It's a porch for the upstairs. That's where the dogs hung out most of the day. I hated those dogs. The White House on the corner was one of those houses, the ones that can change a block. Like a lot of things in life, when something bad happens to you or around you, you expect that bad thing to happen again right away. When it doesn't happen, eventually you expect it to happen less and less. When something bad happens and it happens again, it takes a lot longer not to worry. After the White House on the corner was shot at the first time, we waited, hoping it wouldn't happen again. Then it did. And then it happened another time. It's public record who owns a house, which means it's public record who owns the White House on the corner. If you look up the tax records for that house, my name is on there, and it's spelled right this time. When I looked it up after it became a problem, I saw who owned it and where they lived. The name I found is a woman's name, and her address was somewhere in California, 2,000 miles away. There aren't that many women in California that have this person's name, but there is more than one. Luckily, there's only one that talks about real estate investment online. On a chat board, is that what they're even called? She talked about how she wanted to replace her income with rental properties. Passive income is what it's called. It's when you use your assets to produce an income so you don't have to work anymore. Some people call it being financially independent and retiring early. Otherwise known as FIRE. I thought I wanted to do the same thing when I first started buying and renovating houses. When I was teaching, I ended up being in charge of organizing the administration of the ACT exam. I hated coordinating that test, and honestly, I hated teaching math. So I spent the makeup day of the exam drawing up a plan to not have to be a teacher anymore. The plan said I could own 7 houses and not have to work outside of the rental properties. 7 would be enough to replace my income from teaching and never have to work again. I wasn't paying much attention to the 4 kids testing that day. All I did was compound interest calculations and draw timelines on scrap pieces of paper. The math makes a lot of sense, and it's hard to argue with. When I read her profile, I saw a piece of her in me. The math made sense to her too. Her profile told me what she did for a living. It's a good job, and she's the only woman in California with her job and her name. So when I found a LinkedIn profile of someone with her name and her job and that her employer was located in the state of California, I signed up for a free trial of LinkedIn Plus or LinkedIn Prime, whatever it's called, and DM'd her. This is what I sent to her. Hi, woman in California that has that one type of job. I live 2 houses down from a property you own in Milwaukee. I'd really like to speak to you about the property and some of the things we've noticed going on there. I'm currently very concerned for the safety of my family and my neighbors. Would you be willing to speak to me over the phone? Thank you, Alex. When I Googled her address, the street view showed a picture of $1 million home somewhere in California. It's frustrating living 2 houses down from a place that's being shot at regularly. It's even more frustrating to tell the owner of the property what is happening and get blown off from the other side of the country. She asked for my information so the property manager could talk to me. I spoke with the property manager, but didn't get very far. Eventually, they told me both tenants were about to be evicted, but I had already moved the upper tenant, Muffin, and her family out. The back and forth lasted a couple of months. Somewhere in the conversations, I mentioned that, I owned property in the area, and if this wasn't working out for her, I'd be happy to buy the place. Hey, woman from California with that one type of job. I'm really not trying to be a pain about this, but yesterday a couple of people walked into the house with assault rifles, and there was another shooting out back of the house less than an hour ago. I understand the property management company can work on the issue, but there is a level of personal liability on your end, and I'd really like to speak to you directly about it. My number is... I'm very concerned that someone innocent is going to be killed, and it seems like you're not taking this seriously. Alex. If you aren't willing or are unable to actively manage your rental properties, you probably shouldn't have those rental properties, because bad things can happen there. Either the tenants aren't taken care of, or the tenants do whatever they want, including things that make people want to shoot them. I've learned a lot about what to do and what not to do as a landlord over the years. When I walked into the first house we were thinking of buying, the list of improvements were massive. New plumbing, new electrical, move this wall, renovate the kitchen and bathrooms, fix the porch, replace a furnace. $15,000 or even $30,000 houses aren't move-in ready. They require a tremendous amount of work to get them in the condition that you or I would expect, and that's just to keep my end of the deal for baseline expectations. Then, when something breaks, you have to fix it. This year, on Christmas Eve, I got a text from one of the tenants saying they didn't have hot water. Nothing is open on Christmas Day, so they were either going to be without hot water for 4 more hours or 48 more hours. I didn't really have 4 hours that day, but I figured it out, moved some things around, and 4 hours later, I had a new water heater installed, and they weren't without hot water on Christmas. When I tell people I know about our rentals, some of them joke about me being a slumlord. They've never sat in a slumlord's office or tried to explain to a woman in California with a particular job that her mismanagement had caused all sorts of problems. They don't know how far from a slumlord I set the bar for myself, but they also haven't had as many conversations with people from my neighborhood about their shitty landlords as I have. Those conversations are always the same. This thing is broke and not getting fixed. My place is falling apart. The landlord cheated me out of my money. The objective of the slumlord is to make money. You make the most money when you collect rent and do the bare minimum. Eventually, the problem tenants were evicted. Not all evictions are bad. This one wasn't. They should have been evicted. Things had gotten out of hand, and there were no signs that they would get better. After the eviction, the house was put up for sale for almost 3 times what it was bought for a year earlier. I went back and forth with both the property manager, who was serving as her real estate agent, and the woman from California with a particular job. After a bunch of back and forth, we settled on a price and we bought the house. In the fall of that year, Meg was talking with one of our neighbors. They told her, "I'm glad it's not a problem anymore." The difference between a slumlord and a high-quality landlord is the transferring of problems. The heat has gone out in my own house before. I remember what that's like. I had to go to Home Depot and buy space heaters. If I do that for my own family, I can't not have the expectation that I would do the same for someone else's family. Their problem is transferred to me, and we share the problem. I can live without hot water for a day, but it gets old quickly. Any landlord has the capacity to be a slumlord. But the old man whose office was behind bulletproof glass with hundreds of manila folders is labeled one. The woman from California with a particular job caused more problems and created more situational dynamics, far worse than what I saw from him. In my mind, she is the new slumlord. After we closed on the house, I walked through it with our son, who was 10 at the time. We counted bullet holes. I remember 16 is the number we landed on. 16 times someone tried to kill one of the people living there. No one has ever tried to kill me. I don't hear most of my neighbors describing times when someone tried to shoot them. When maximizing profits is more important than creating appropriate living conditions, bad things happen. The easiest people to take advantage of are the people that do not have a lot of options, and the people in my neighborhood don't have many. But shouldn't the people with the fewest options, with the smallest amount of margin, be the ones that we take advantage of the least?
All right.
We hope you liked listening to that. Like I
Hope
said,
you listened to it.
yeah, I feel like the rest of the chapters in Bad Neighborhoods are very similar to this. So again, go to that podcast feed, Bad Neighborhoods, and you can start at the beginning.
Yeah, there is an order to it.
yeah.
It's essentially chronological
Yeah,
order.
it's a good order.
Yeah, I guess.
It's in order.
It's in order, yeah. Yes, you would want to start with one.
Yeah.
But if you just had listened to, I think, what is this, like 21, that's okay. You're going to be fine.
You're going to be okay.
You can
Yeah.
go back. It's not a big deal. You could bounce around if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd be lost.
Yeah.
But
But
I
yeah,
think
go listen to it again.
the beginning is usually a good place to start.
Again, on the Bad Neighborhoods feed. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to this.
Yeah, if you just type in on search.
People don't need to know that.
Well, I might. Meg, maybe you're still this way. I feel like there was a time we got iPhones. I feel like we were one of the first people that, like, in our friend groups that had iPhones.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like I knew how to do everything.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think I just stopped. I stopped trying.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, now I'm like, I don't know how to do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And the kids are yelling at me because I
Yeah.
don't know.
Oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot all the time because I'm like, oh, I didn't know how to do this. Yeah.
It's like I've had an iPhone since before you were born, and now
Yeah.
you're yelling at me
Yeah.
about not knowing
Yeah.
how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways, thanks for checking that out, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.